Hi, welcome to BariNation, where we support the bariatric community with humor, humility, and honesty.
You've just tuned into a podcast that welcomes you into a community, a resource center, and a safe place that powers your journey towards personal wellness.
Our goal is you leave us today feeling hopeful, inspired, and ready to live your best bariatric life.
Hey, it's April. One of the most powerful things that I have learned as a leader and a member in the BariNation support community is that I really spent a lot of time learning and practicing what it meant to be a bariatric patient when life was good. And when all of a sudden life got chaotic, I knew what to do. I did not default to those old ways of coping with stress and panic and anxiety. I turned to the community and I showed up in a way that I could show up. I didn't feel pressured. I didn't feel worried about not participating in the ways that I normally do. It was my safe place to just be. So instead of turning to food or alcohol or shopping, I turned to the community. And even though my life got turned upside down, my bariatric journey didn't. It might have taken a pause, but it didn't go off the rails. And the reason I was able to do that is because I have spent the time, I have invested my time in learning all of those skills in the BariNation support groups, in the classes, and the meetups. I learned from the experts and I learned from the members there. And it allowed me to stay grounded and to be okay when everything around me wasn't. It's the power of the BariNation membership community, and everybody can benefit. Join us, barination.mn.co. I can't wait to see you there.
Well, hello, BariNation. It's April. Today, I have the honor of interviewing an expert that we have never interviewed on the podcast yet. But not only is she an amazing registered dietitian out of Dallas, she's also joining us in the BariNation membership community as an expert and will be teaching monthly classes. I had the honor to meet Andrea really a few months ago, and every time we talk, she absolutely blows my mind with the things that she says. And today's conversation is going to be about one of those things. But before we kind of dive into it, Andrea, I'd love to turn the microphone over to you so you can introduce yourselves to our listeners, friends, and watchers.
Yes, thank you. As you mentioned, I have a private practice in the Dallas area in Plano, Texas. I have 4 other dietitians on my team with me. We focus on bariatric health, a big focus on relationship with food, diabetes, kidney disease, and weight loss, which bariatrics has become one of my favorite topics because you get to cover everything with patients, everything we went to school for. So I've been a dietitian for about 16, almost 17 years, which sounds like a really long time. But I worked all in clinical nutrition for majority of my career in ICUs, burn units. I've worked in bariatric surgery centers. So after doing all of that about 5 years ago, 2019, I decided to do the private practice thing because you actually get to help patients long-term. So it's great in the hospital, you get them recovered, or after surgery, you get the initial education, but it's like, well, I want to see what happens like 6 months from now. They need us more than this. And private practice for dietitians was not very popular then. It's starting to become more popular, which is a really good thing. But that's kind of went to the private practice route, which has been so much fun because our goal is always to have our patients be like their own little dietitian by the end of it. So it's like when we let the little birdie fly, it's like, oh, wait, you can pinpoint why you don't do that fad diet, or what this craving actually means. And we're always there for check-ins, but that's been kind of the fun side of it. So like working with more of our bariatric patients and learn more about BariNation is just super, super exciting.
Oh, it has been phenomenal. When Heather Cribbins called me, she said, hey, I think there's somebody that I really want to introduce you to because you guys are going to click. And I think she'd be a fabulous addition, right, to BariNation. And I was like, yeah, of course. Anybody Heather wants me to meet, I'm going to meet. And the first time that the 3 of us were on a Zoom screen, it was you, me, and Heather. You were saying things that I had never heard in my life and absolutely blowing my mind. And Heather was just dying, and you were like, am I saying something wrong? Like, no, absolutely not. You were saying all the right things. I just could not believe that I've been a bariatric patient now for 5 years. I've had the honor of working with both Kayla and Jeannie, and I have learned so much from them. And just what you said, I feel like when I kind of left their expert embrace, I really was feeling, and I am so much more empowered about my nutrition, about bariatric nutrition. But after talking with you, I learned so much more. And what I appreciate is that as we go through our bariatric journey, we need new nuggets of information, right? Like we're at a different stage, we're at a different place, and new information is needed. And just in that initial hour-long conversation that I had with you, it was like, oh my gosh, I needed what you were going to talk about today, what you're going to teach us about today, because it's a question that we all have. And it's something that we absolutely need to understand along our bariatric journey. So I'll quit giving these little breadcrumbs. Today's conversation. Oh, I didn't even mean to do that, but today's conversation.
I guess that's really cute.
Right? I was like, oh my God, it's a breadcrumb of knowledge.
For carbs.
Exactly. Our conversation today is going to be about carbs. They have a very bad rap right now in the world in general. And as patients, we are told to limit our carbs in the beginning, but that it's okay to add them back in as we move out from surgery. But there's a lot of confusion about like really what they are, the role that they serve in our lives, which ones are maybe better or best for our bariatric journey. But the word that you gave me that I'm excited for everybody else to have today is that the Krebs cycle, what it is. So if you are curious and wondering about carbs, even if you are in the pre-op stage, this episode is for you. If you are anywhere along your post-op bariatric journey, this information will hopefully really fill in this missing piece that maybe has been circling in your brain about your bariatric life. But the goal is that we're going to leave this conversation with a much better understanding of what carbs are, why our body needs them, and how our body utilizes them. It's going to be an awesome conversation. So I say, let's just dive in.
Yeah, perfect. Yes, I'm a science nerd. So anytime I get on like the biochem stuff, it's like, it's my thing. It's my jam.
Oh, and that's why, again, when we met the first time, I was like, oh, we are going to get along just fine because all of our members and so many of you that are listening or watching, this is your jam. You are a bariatric learner. You want to know the why and you want to know the science behind it. So that's really, really what today's conversation is all about. So let's kind of start at the beginning. Let's start at the basics. Why do carbs get such a bad rap in our world?
Well, it's definitely, I think it's with all the keto and the Atkins diets that came out. Gosh, how many years ago was Atkins? I feel like I was maybe in high school, so a long time ago.
Yeah, like 20 years.
Yeah, where it's like, in a sense, like very surface level, it would theoretically make sense because our body's preferred energy source is carbohydrates. When there aren't enough carbs, our body will then, our body always wants to survive. So our body thinks, well, it's not there. I'm not just going to die. What else is available for me to use? The next best thing is going to be fat. And so theoretically, it's like, okay, great. Well, if I take out carbs, then of course my body's going to burn fat. And like for the first 5 or 10% of your weight loss, that might be completely fine and really won't throw anything off too much. But from there, your body will start to sense, wait a second, something's not right because we all have a genetic blueprint. Our body knows how many decades it's kind of planning to last. And if you're already in this perceived famine, because that's what the brain is thinking. If we're taking out the energy source that the brain itself wants, it's like, wait a second, we're in a famine right now. Let's switch systems and slow everything down. So I need to save my fat because I might need it again. Let's burn down maybe a little bit of muscle now for energy too. So our brain will always think of the big picture essentially. And so if we don't have the carbs, it'll go to fat. If we don't have that, it'll start to burn down some of our muscle. When we start burning through muscle, we actually lose a lot of water with that. So when we step on the scale, say we're doing keto for a very long time, it's like, oh, yay, I'm losing weight. It's like you're actually in a very dehydrated state. So the pounds may look different, but if we were to put you under like some kind of special x-ray machine, we would say you have very limited water in your body. Your muscle mass is actually going down. But surface level, it's like, well, yeah, I'm not going to eat carbs. My weight is going down. The other issue with that is that carbohydrates naturally store water, which is a good thing. That's how our body keeps us hydrated. But if we cut back, say we restrict carbs and then, our body, we push ourselves to a primal state to binge on them essentially. So we might think, oh, I've been doing keto. Oh, then over the weekend, I had to eat carbs. Well, your brain literally prompted you to do that because it was very scared. Maybe you smell bread cooking. There'll be something that triggers it that lets your brain know the food is available. Just like when a pregnant woman, her sense of smell goes up because food is so important to the baby. Same thing when your body is in a perceived famine, when it knows whether it's visual, smell, anything, when it knows that food is available and you eat it, and then it's almost like, well, I binged on it. Well, okay, so that is the first thing that happens. It's like, well, I binged on it. Well, now that we were in famine deficiency mode, for every like gram, we'll say, of carbs you were deficient, you're going to hold on to 2 molecules of water just temporarily. It's a kind of a survival mechanism. Instead of the normal, like the natural little bond they'll hold together, water and carbs, it's going to double it because it's dehydrated and it's scared that it's in a famine. So what happens after we overdo it on carbs for a weekend? We're going to weigh ourselves Monday morning. We're going to see all this water weight. Like, I knew it, carbs made me gain weight. So it's this crazy reinforcement where, say we're on keto or something really restrictive, it's like weigh every Monday, weigh every other day. Well, your poor body was like craving this main nutrient. So you ate it. And then to survive it, held with some water with it. And then you weighed yourself. And it's this crazy cycle where it's like carbs are evil. But again, if you don't have that science knowledge, it completely makes sense. Like if you're trained to weigh so much and trained to cut things out, and you're not thinking about what the science of the body might actually be doing when we're doing all these things. So those reinforcers, and of course, celebrity endorsement also makes carbs the devil. But it's like, but again, the guy who came up with it, like, what a genius, right? How much money did he probably make doing this, where it's like, you're going to lose the weight, but it's not the weight that you want to lose.
Yeah, it's not sustainable, nor is it healthy. And as you were talking about that, what I was thinking was about, right, when I was 1, 2, and 3 months post-op from bariatric surgery, I was having a heck of a time hitting my hydration goals because, right, I was in a lot of physical pain. I could only sip little bits at a time. I knew I was thirsty, I was dehydrated, but I just didn't have like the physical capacity to get that in. So not only was I deficient in carbohydrates, I was drinking a lot of protein, or I was following my guidelines, but those guidelines definitely are low carbohydrate guidelines. And then I was dehydrated on top of that. So really it's like a 1-2 whammy when you are initially out of surgery, just because of what you physically have gone through.
Well, and so after surgery, the reason why it's kind of okay to have the lower carb is because, again, the body switches into like recovery mode. So there's been a major trauma. As long as we're hitting those protein goals, the body's like, oh, perfect. Let's send all this extra protein to heal. And then when the brain's like, well, I need my energy, it's like, it's okay. That's why we have excess body fat. It'll turn that into energy for you. But that's why we say maybe, and everyone's body is different. So some patients who really increase their like exercise levels, their carbs are going to change as we progress after surgery. But as we get further and further out from surgery, especially when we see patients, like if they feel like they hit a plateau, it's like, it's probably time to add carbs back in because your brain is thinking it's not coming out of the famine. So initially, we definitely recommend that because as long as you're getting your protein in, you're fine. Your body's going to metabolize the body fat. Again, a certain percentage, you're not going to break anything down. You'll be okay. It is hard to get the hydration in, but that's just something we work on. So no major deficiencies are going to happen in that short amount of time. But it's like when we do these fad diets and cycle it every few months, we're doing the keto again. So, but patients get really scared when they hit, which is normal to hit a plateau. We don't go straight down in anything, but we're like, well, let's add some carbs back in, even if it's applesauce. And like, no, I can't. I'm not supposed to do carbs. It's like, right, like for the first little bit, you're not supposed to, but right now your body could be going into like a perceived famine. We boost it right out of that with a little bit of variety in those macronutrients. And then your body's like, oh, I'm okay. Let's keep burning like we were. But it's scary though. It's scary.
It is. And I appreciate you saying that. So I'm just going to reiterate so I make sure I understand this, right? So right after surgery, which we have all been told as patients, protein heavy, protein. It's going to help you recover. It's going to help you maintain that muscle loss, right? So if you have enough protein going in your system, lacking the carbs is going to be okay. It's going to focus on the fat and it's not going to deteriorate your muscle. And that is going to help you heal. But when we get right 3, 4, 5, 6 months out, our body can't sustain that. And we have really reached this level of healing that now it is ready for that energy source again. It's ready for the carbohydrates to enter so that we're not burning necessarily just the fat and we're still protecting our muscle mass, right? Because that's equally important. So that's why we see these dietary recommendations from our surgeons that say low carb at first, focus on protein. And then as we get out, we're adding in a more holistic food source because we need to make sure that our body has all of these different macronutrients to function properly.
That's perfect. Yeah, that's exactly right. Where it's like we have to remember that right after surgery, our body is completely different than a few months after surgery, where it's like, we're in recovery mode. We want to heal the organ, but then it's like we get into where you still have a human brain and kidneys and everything. So it's like, okay, the brain got scared because there was no carbs. Things slow down as soon as you get some variety in there. The body knows how much stored fat it doesn't want. So as soon as you give it the nutrients it needs, it'll start to prioritize just fat burn. The body does not want to burn muscle. It knows it needs it. So it will only do that if it absolutely has to.
Okay. So you've kind of explained like what carbs are. They are the body's preferred energy source. So what happens in our bodies when we take in carbohydrates? How does it break them down? How does it use them?
Oh, yeah. So it'll start a little bit of breakdown in our mouth, just a little bit, but most of the absorption and everything takes place in the small intestine. And so we have our complex carbohydrates and our simple carbs. And again, simple carbs are another one that kind of get bad reputation too, where you think, oh, fruit, what did I hear? Someone told me that their doctor told them grapes are, not their surgeon, but it was like a PCB, that their grapes are sugar bombs. I'm like, no. It's like fruit is simple sugar, but it's not simple sugar like a candy bar, because when the food goes to the small intestine, say we have a simple carbohydrate like strawberries and we have a complex carb like bread, a whole grain bread. Well, all the body sees as a simple carb is there's less to break down. So it's going to break down the vitamins and it's going to push the vitamins where it needs to go. You're not going to have a big rise in blood sugar like you do with like candy. So it's not going to be a rapid rise because your body wants to take time to take the vitamins first. With complex carbs like bread, that is just more to break down. That's why we call them complex. And so they take a longer time to go through the digestive tract. Things like fiber too, like our broccoli, our carrots, they take longer to go through the digestive tract, which is good. So you're going to have a slower rise in blood sugar and a slower release of insulin. But again, when our body takes these carbohydrates, it doesn't turn it into fat. It's actually stored in the liver and they're stored in the muscles and a little bit stored in the brain. They're one of the only nutrients that can actually cross the blood-brain barrier for energy. So the brain definitely knows when they're missing. Now, proteins and fats can cross too for energy. So if the brain, again, doesn't have its carbs, it'll use that stuff, but we don't want to do it for too long. So after, everything's absorbed in the small intestine, things are put where they need to go. Our body wants to prioritize carbs into the liver and muscle because when we need that sustained energy, it's right there to absorb. The only time it gets stored as fat is if those little storage in the liver and muscle they're already stored and we keep storing more and storing more. But so it's a fine line to where it's like, yeah, we want to decrease maybe some of the carbs that you're having, but we also want to increase the energy needs of the body. So we do both at the same time once we reach a certain point after, recovery after surgery to where we don't have to restrict forever. Part of it's increasing the energy needs of the body. So our body is burning some carbs and allowing some more storage room in the muscles. So carbs aren't directly stored as fat unless we've exceeded our storage in our muscles, which takes time to do. That doesn't happen in a weekend of eating like pasta one night for dinner. It doesn't happen in a week. It's like a long process of that happening.
Okay. So for people who are maybe worried, because I know that conversation about fruit has come up in our community. It kind of comes up everywhere, right? People are a little bit afraid of fruit. And is it because of that connection that people have made between like fruit and like natural sugars, and sugar is also bad? So there's that connection there. Or is there another reason that sometimes people in our community are afraid to enjoy fruit?
I think part of it may just be, after surgery, we say add one new food at a time. Some patients may not tolerate a certain fruit and they're worried that they're never going to tolerate that fruit again. So instead of trying to add it back in, like, oh no, all simple sugars, where it's like, again, simple sugars, which I kind of wish there's a different name for it that's like in candy and things like that, because the body looks at it differently. When the body sees simple carbs from like fruit, it sees vitamins. Yes, we're going to have a little bit of insulin release just to make sure everything moves where it needs to go. But when we have a candy bar, and that's just, a candy bar, soda, some type of simple carb, the blood sugar is going to rise up really quick and go right back down because the body didn't have anything to do with it. If we have that on occasion, it's not going to do anything. But if the body sees these things come in, it's like, yeah, I'll release the insulin to let it travel. But otherwise, we don't have a use for it. So we'll do what we can with it. So with fruit, it's like your body has work to do with it. And it wants to distribute like the vitamins throughout.
Oh, okay. So that's what just kind of clicked in my head, right? So when you're talking about simple sugars in terms of fruit, it's simple because there's not a lot of elements to it, but there is nutrients there, right? There's vitamins there. There's things that your body will do with that with that carbohydrate. Whereas with simple sugars that are in candy, there's no nutrients there. There's no vitamins there, right? So it goes to use it, there's nothing there, it burns it up and it's gone, but you're left with this higher level of insulin because it thought it was going to need to do all of this work, but there isn't actually any work there to do, right? So they're just kind of left hanging, like, oh,
So
what
you
am I
have
supposed to do now?
Yeah, spike of blood sugar and then like a crash. Because again, the insulin brought it down. But like when we have natural sugars, again, when there's work to do, it's a natural lower of the blood sugar versus just like a crash because there was nothing to do with it. And sometimes we do tell patients, if you're worried about like the biggest goal we have, especially for women as we get into like our 40s and things like that, the best thing to do, because some people worry about cortisol levels being up, just pair fruit or any carb with a protein. And all it does, it makes a slower insulin release and a slower rise in the blood sugar. So it's something that you have to do. I mean, if you're diabetic, we do that. But when people are really worried about, glycemic index, all these different things, like pair it with a protein, it'll break down slower, have a more natural release. But other than that, like you should be having fruit. We should be having these things in our diet because they have so many other functions in the body. If we don't have vitamin A and vitamin C, what are we supposed to do? So there's a lot of times too, I'll print out almost like what a diagram of like dopamine or different hormones, like the chemical structure of it, what that would look like. And I show our patients, this is a carbohydrate chain, essentially. This is part of a carb. This is part of protein. This is vitamin A, making part of serotonin or oxytocin. How is your body supposed to make these hormones if you're physically not eating it? Like we can't make stuff out of nothing. We can't turn protein and body fat into hormones. We can't turn it, into the immune system for support. It's like we actually, once we understand the science of it and what the brain and body think it's getting with nutrients, not our conscious self, then things start to click differently. Because truly, if we don't have like vitamin A and vitamin C from fruit, how are we supposed to make the cells for the immune system? We can't turn fat into everything.
Does this kind of tie into the conversation or the recommendations that we've heard from a lot of people in this community that, right, like vitamins and supplementation is absolutely necessary and needed because a lot of times, depending on our surgery and just how our bodies are built, it's difficult to get in the amount of nutrients that we need from whole foods. And that's why vitamin supplementation comes in first. But this is part of the reason for the call to action to eat whole foods as a bariatric patient, right? Because that whole food contains so many dense vitamins and nutrients that our body desperately needs. And when we are taking in that whole food, right, we're increasing those levels, not to the level that maybe we could have gotten before surgery, hence the vitamin, right, why the vitamins are so important. But that's why that drive to eat whole foods is so important, right? Because in the processing stage, those things are getting stripped out of that food. So it might be more convenient, but it's not actually providing our body with the raw nutrients and that the density, the fibers that we need to be healthy long-term.
Exactly. And that's even when I'll have patients, maybe we have a patient that's 4 months, post-op, and we didn't see the patient pre-op or anything, brand new patient. And they're like, okay, I've tried to cut this out, I've tried to cut that out. And I usually say, okay, let's pump the brakes and let's see if you're not getting enough of the foods that actually make the body work. So before we talk about taking out, let's get what makes the body work and then see if you're firing on all cylinders. Because we can't expect much from the body if we're not getting the basics of what we need. Even when we see patients start to get, maybe, I'm getting sick easier, things like that. We still talk about, okay, are you getting in the good kinds of carbs you need? Because even more of the complex carbs are fibrous vegetables. There's a part that's not broken down and absorbed in the small intestine, actually goes all the way to the colon. It's not broken down with enzymes, but actually the bacteria in the colon uses uses fermentation for those kinds of carbs to feed itself. So our GI tract needs carbohydrates and fiber because they ferment those, feed themselves. And once our gut health is healthy, it pushes things to the immune system also. So when we see patients like, hey, you're not getting veggies in, not getting this, like, I'm getting all these protein shakes. It's like, how is your gut lining feeding itself? And so when we start to say, hey, these foods have a function more than just this many calories, I weighed this today, I tracked this. It's like, but what does your body think is going on? Because your body doesn't know what MyFitnessPal is. It just knows, hey, my microbiome wasn't fed today. I haven't fermented anything. I'm getting a little sluggish. So that's why we always look at that big picture. These carbs have functions from the stomach down to the colon. It wants to be doing something with it.
And wow. What popped into my head as you were saying that is, in my personal lived experience, it is really challenging for me to listen to what my body is asking for. I felt like I haven't been able to trust it my entire life. It was always asking for things that I just didn't think were helpful, but I didn't have the strength, the energy, the capacity to fight back against it, right? The disease of obesity makes it really challenging for me, and I think for many others, to actually listen to what our body needs. But when you're talking, what I'm hearing are some phrases and some things that I can use to talk back to this hunger that I have. And I've called it my obesity hunger now for really kind of about a year. I think I've got 3 types of hunger: physical hunger, emotional hunger, which is driven by my emotions. But there's this third type of hunger that has always lived in my life, and I just call it my obesity hunger. And it's this type of hunger that is constant. It's just this low hum of need and want and desire, but really just this gnawing nature. And the thing that's so frustrating about it is it doesn't really know what it wants. It's just constantly there in the back of my brain. And because I've been through surgery, I've gotten this break from all 3 of my types of hunger. I got a break from physical, from emotional, and even from obesity hunger. I'm 5 years out, and that obesity hunger is back. But what I hear you saying are things like, have I fed my gut, my microbiome? Have I fermented anything today, right? Have I taken in the vitamins that are necessary for my immune system to function properly? Because I guess when I say those things out loud, it kind of sounds crazy, but it's not. It's the most logical thing I've ever asked my hunger. I guess my hunger doesn't have an answer for it, which is almost like the first time, I guess, in my life that hunger is like, well, I don't know. Like, it's almost like offended. Like, well, why would you ask such a silly question? It's like, oh, no. It's because those are the questions that it doesn't have a response for. Those are the questions that hunger is not prepared for. And I don't know if it's necessarily like they're fighting against each other, but for the first time, I feel like that's a really rational question, that I'm asking something that I have felt has been irrational for my entire life. So it's like I'm fighting back against that with something very different, and something that's very truthful and real and like meaningful for my body, for who I am as a person.
No, that makes absolute sense. I have so many patients that say like kind of the exact same thing. And we kind of discussed that, where it's like, okay, you met your calories, you closed your rings, you did all the thing, but did you have the nutrients you needed? Because even for a majority of my patients, I don't recommend doing, whether it's whatever I'm seeing them for, like really, you don't have to do low fat everything when it comes to dairy, because we might think we're full. Like, oh, I ate enough today. Why is my brain prompting hunger? Because everything you did today was low fat, and the brain is 60% fat. So it didn't get what it wanted. So we want to think too, where it's like, we don't have to be perfect every day, even if we're craving something sweet. And again, we have little diagrams we go over with our patients. If you're craving something sweet, here's some emotions to check into. And then here's some other, like if you're craving salty, here's specific emotions, but then also, are you eating like too clean? Because there is too clean, where it's like, who doesn't have like Captain Crunch as a snack sometimes? It's one of things like that, where it's like, you don't have to be super perfect, and the body doesn't want you to be. Sometimes we do allow the emotional hunger to have its little, taste of food too, as long as we don't have the ripple effect for guilt coming after it and everything else, where it's like, okay, I acknowledge I had a bad day and this sounded good, but it didn't define who I am, and I'm not going to restrict the next day. Because we have a random, like a one-off, like ice cream or something, a fun food, our body doesn't care. We can't change our health with one meal or even one day of eating. Otherwise, we would have heart disease after like Thanksgiving, right? So it's like the body doesn't care. It's not your body's most of the time. So we want to think, what is my most of the time? Okay, I had a burger and fries one day. Body doesn't care. It's going to metabolize it and move on. But then we feel so guilty to where it's like, my cheat meal wasn't until Saturday. It's only Thursday. Let me just screw it until Monday. Or it's like, wait a second. It only shifts things when your body is required to turn that food into its primary fuel. So if it's one meal, your body's going to break it down, maybe upset stomach, your body's trying to get rid of it, when it can. when it shifts to where that's your body's food all of the time, that's when our health changes. So it's like, sometimes it is, and I've heard that like the food noise, or like you said, like the obesity, hunger. I like the way that you termed that, because that makes sense, where it's like, is it emotional response, or is it hunger, or am I not sure? Do I trust my body to fuel it because I'm scared to fall back on something? So it's a lot. I'm glad that you brought that up, because people who haven't worked, who either haven't had surgery or worked with patients, they just think like, you're fine, your stomach's, it's like, it's not, there's so much more to it than that. It's not that, it'd be beautiful if it was that black and white, it'd be so easy, wouldn't it? But it's just not. Like, we have to separate like what biology is doing, our conscious, like there's a lot to it. So yeah, you're not the only one who says that.
Yes, there's so much to it. And we've had the honor of having a lot of conversations with some very skilled mental health professionals, Laura Graba, Christy DeLaura, Sarah Smith, Katie Booker, Tamisha Malone. And this conversation about emotional hunger comes up often. And in one of the podcasts that we recorded with Laura, and in the classes that she teaches in BariNation, she often talks about, like, every craving is a lie. And when she said that line, it really stuck in my brain, because it helps me understand, like, if I'm craving something, what initially that craving is asking for, there is an underlying reason for it. And it can be emotional, it could be physiological, it can be a combination of both. But it's an opportunity for me and for us as patients to go, okay, my brain is asking for something very specific. And if that was driven in like that physiological need, if I was just missing, something, I think my body's going to be like, yo, you need to eat some broccoli, or you need to eat, something along those lines. But when my brain's like, you need some Cheetos, I don't think I actually do. Yeah. Like, there's no real need for Cheetos, but for some reason it's there. So it means something. It means something emotional. It means something physiological, or it's a combination of both. And it's an opportunity for me as a human and as a patient to understand, myself and the different kinds of hunger that I have. But now that I'm 5 years post-op, and I really can do a good job of identifying which hunger I'm experiencing, there's different tools that I need to deploy. And with this obesity hunger that I'm experiencing, those things that you just asked about, like, have I fed my gut microbiome? Have I taken in nutrients for the actual systematic function of my body? There's probably more days than most where my answer would be no.
Okay. And that's something to consider, because our body has a way of telling us things.
Yes. Yeah. And what is making my current situation, I guess, challenging, maybe would probably be the right word, is, so I'm 5 years post-op, bariatric patient, VSG. I'm also on a GLP-1. And that GLP-1 absolutely, for me, eliminates almost any type of hunger. I can feel I'm physically hungry right now. I haven't had anything to eat today. I've had 3 sips of a protein coffee and some water. So see what I mean? Like, so when I ask myself those questions, it's like, oh, okay. Right. And that's a physical hunger that I am experiencing right now. But if we don't take the time to listen or watch these types of conversations, if we don't take the time to have the conversations with ourselves, if we're not asking these questions of peers and other experts and kind of experimenting, we could just think that there's something wrong with us, but there isn't anything wrong with us. This is our body and our brains and our bariatric life doing what it's supposed to do. It's an opportunity for us to really understand how this all works in concert with one another.
No, that's perfect. And even when you mentioned with the GLP-1 medication, the big thing we work with our patients with that is like, okay, we need to, because some doctors will just, symptoms increase. It's like, wait a second. We want to see what your body's actually doing, because just because we're muting the hunger cues doesn't mean the body didn't need food. So there's a fine line where it's like, okay, we want to see what the body's doing. We also want to make sure, we don't want food sitting in the gut for too long, because again, any permutation in the gut microbiome, what actually happens there. So this is really cool. And I'm always trying, my husband's an ICU nurse. I always try to explain this to him. He's like, it's over my head. I'm like, it's science. You should get this. So, because they'll see commercials like, well, why does that happen? If you see commercials that say, like, if you have thoughts like depression, essentially if there's mood changes on certain medications where it's like, why would that happen? If there's an interruption in your gut microbiome, that's where hormones are made. They're sent through the vagus nerve to the brain. Totally natural process. It's supposed to happen. If food sits in there too long, if there's an interruption of that gut microbiome, or if the gut is just not healthy, then a signal actually gets sent to your parasympathetic nervous system saying, hey, something's wrong. this is my main way to fuel you and it's not working. It's not passing to the small intestine to give you energy. I'm scared. So that's where it's like emotional. I've had patients say, as soon as my doctor increased it, I'm moody. Most doctors know what this is very rare. Obviously, doctors know what they're doing, but I'm moody when they increase it. It's like, okay, well, you're showing, talk to them about that. Those are things they are looking for because your body is saying, wait a second, this is throwing me off. This is not supposed to happen. But again, I've seen like tons of patients on a completely normal dose and lose weight. They come off and they keep the weight off. It's great. But that's what we always listen to our bodies. So just because the signals are muted doesn't mean we didn't need it. But again, what's our brain thinking? It's like, again, you have how many decades ahead of us? We have a blueprint and the body's like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And so we always pay attention to what the body is saying. And like you said, when it's like, okay, the obesity hunger, again, what does your brain think maybe it didn't get that day? Our conscious self always puts us in the wrong. We're always doing something more than we're supposed to, right? But what does the actual science and the little chemistry experiment that's always going on in the body, what is that thinking is going on?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. And in BariNation, we say that is the work of weight loss surgery, right? Those conversations that you have with yourself, those experiments that you run, right? When it comes to your food and your eating times and all those things, that's actually the work of weight loss surgery. I think so many of us go into surgery thinking, I'm just going to eat less. And the work of weight loss surgery is going to be to continue to eat less.
Protein, yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, that is not the work at all. But you don't know it until you're living it. And then it can feel daunting at times and overwhelming because you're like, oh my God, there's just so much to do. There is. But I think what this conversation has hopefully really elevated is that it's not about doing everything all at once at the same time perfectly. It's about learning about these things as we go and implementing them and experimenting along the way, right? It is not about like everything all at once all the time perfectly. It is about, oh, this is new information for me. This is really going to help me in this aspect of my journey. I'm going to try to implement these things and just see what it's all about. That space and grace from that perfection or that desire to do things immediately right away is key to this bariatric journey. And it applies especially to this nutritional aspect of our life.
Now, and I'm glad you mentioned kind of the part with bariatric patients after surgery, because a lot do think that it's okay, I just have to keep up with the diet after surgery. Great. And it's not a big thing that I know my dietitians do too, because I always encourage it. When we do our pre-bariatric assessment, like you have to ask them what their self-talk is like. When you go to the doctor and they're about to weigh you, what is your self-talk like? And our patients are like, what does that have to do with my post-op phase 3 diet? It's like, we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about the big picture. So if this is the only visit we have with you or we continue to see you pre and post-op, this needs to be at the forefront and somewhat addressed before surgery, where it's like, are you tearing yourself down before you step on the scale? Every time you're hungry, do you think, I shouldn't be because I'm this way? It's like, focus on your self-talk just as much as your protein. And a big thing we tell our patients too, when they're comparing themselves maybe 6 months post-op, oh, this person on Facebook isn't as hungry. It's like, do you trust your thirst signals? Do you trust when you have to go to the bathroom, when you have a headache? Then why don't you trust your hunger? Yeah, and they're like, because I don't. And that's when we dive into, when has it done you wrong? When do you feel like it has done you wrong in the past? So that's a big piece of it too. Like you said, people underestimate the work that you guys have to do because they think it's like, oh, surgery. Oh, it's like, it makes you address your like self-talk. It is hard.
It is a whole thing. That's why in BariNation, we have 4 pillars of bariatric success. They are movement, mindset, metabolic wellness, and community. And really, we have to live all of those pillars each and every day if we want to find lasting success. Just doing one thing in each of those pillars is a great day. Doing one thing in one pillar is a great day. But it really does take all of those things because everything is just so interconnected with one another. And we say it all the time in BariNation as well, right? This journey is about trust. It is about learning to trust ourselves, learning when we maybe can't be trusted, when we're trying to talk ourselves out of making a decision that's maybe good for us, or we're having a hard time making a decision that is good for us. There's a lot that goes into it. But yeah, as you kind of start to move through the journey, you realize, oh, what I thought this was about kind of isn't. It really is about all of these other things. And I think it's our job to help people understand that it's going to be all of these things and you don't have to do them all at once. But right, introducing information kind of in a slow roll, in a slow drip is key, because it's just so overwhelming all at once.
Yeah, well, especially if you feel like you have to do it all on your own too, where you think, or you look, like I said, if you're on maybe a platform that's not as supportive and it's like everyone how perfect they're doing, and then you kind of want to internalize everything. So it's like the community is such a big part of it, because it's like, you still, after surgery, it's like, we're excited. I always say it's like when you're having a baby, you should feel special. Like every stage should be special and celebrated. But then it's like when you hit the struggles, it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize. And then as soon as one thing isn't perfect, it's like, oh, I shouldn't have done it. So it's like, wait, we have to come together and realize we're all in this together and voice our concerns. And like you said, give grace. Like at the end of it, you still have a human body. You're going to crave something at some point. The human body just does. We might be fighting off a virus, or maybe we're building some muscle. We have to account for that with cravings. And if the body, I like what you said though, the cravings are a lie, because it is, you want to break it down a step further. If I'm craving this, okay, why? So it's like, even if it's like I'm craving, a steak. Okay, why would I? Oh, because I built muscle. You always want to think about the science behind why our body's prompting us, whether it's a fun food or a functional food.
Mm-hmm. Ooh. Oh, that's a new one. Is it a fun food or a functional food? Oh,
because I hate the term junk food. It's so annoying. No food is junk. Sometimes it's just fun. Right?
And we're allowed to enjoy food. Oh my goodness. Okay. Andrea, you are going to be an absolute amazing fit in the BariNation community. We are thrilled that you're going to be joining us to lead a class once a month. If you are listening to this podcast, you're watching this podcast, and you're going, oh my God, I want to know more about this, or I want to spend more time with Andrea, I have questions I want to ask her, you will have the opportunity to interact with her each and every month in the BariNation membership support community. She's going to be teaching once a month there. And Andrea, you also work with clients one-on-one. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes. So like I said, I have 4 dietitians. My team says 5 of us total. We all specialize in different things. So my passion is bariatric health, sports nutrition, eating disorders, and kidney disease. And then 2 of my other dietitians do bariatrics and diabetes. So we all have different specialties, but we do in-person and virtual consultations.
Oh, so if you think that Andrea would be a person that you would love to work with, absolutely reach out to her. All of her contact information is linked here in the show notes. Like I said, I've worked with dietitians along my bariatric journey one-on-one. It has been a true gift. One of the best investments I've made in my journey, besides being a member of BariNation. So if you are vibing with Andrea, if you're like, okay, this human gets me and can help, absolutely reach out for that one-on-one support. It is needed and necessary many times along our journey. So Andrea, before we go, we always love to kind of give our microphone to our expert guests at the end. So what's the one thing that you're hoping people are leaving this conversation, maybe knowing or understanding about carbs?
That they're okay to eat, that we do. It's about a balance, and not a perfect balance. We're counting our macros, but just start to learn your cravings, and it's okay to have carbs. We just want to learn which one our body's asking for.
Amazing. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today. This conversation was enlightening and impactful. As I was going through, I was like, oh my God, I got to remember this. I literally am going to go through what I rewatch. I try, but it's going to be awesome. So if you're going to be like me, if you're watching and listening, and this is going to be an episode that you watch again, make sure that you bookmark it. And also too, friends, share this episode with other people in your bariatric world. And even not, this information applies to people that are not on a bariatric journey. It just applies to all humans, because humans are carb machines and need them for energy. So if this episode was like an aha moment for you, if you found it valuable, pass it along to somebody else in your world so that they can have this information as well. Andrea, thank you again for joining us today. This was amazing. I can't wait to see you in the BariNation membership community soon.
Yes, I'm excited. Thank you.
Hi, BariNation. It's Natalie, one of the co-founders of the podcast, as well as the BariNation support community. The holidays are coming up, and that can feel really overwhelming, especially when we're trying to juggle bariatric life, work life, kids life, holiday life. It can be a lot sometimes. That's why I decided to start leading Set It Up Sunday, which is a wonderful workshop hour held almost every Sunday in November at 9 a.m. Pacific time, noon Eastern. This is a great hour for us to prioritize and organize our lives around our bariatric must-dos. If this is sounding like something you'd like, join us over in the BariNation support community today. See you in the nation soon.
That wraps up another empowering episode of the BariNation podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, keep the conversation going by joining the BariNation membership community, where you can attend live support events, access on-demand resources, and find a caring community.
Join us at barination.mn.co. If you found this podcast valuable, help us produce it by becoming a $5 monthly supporter at barinationpodcast.com.
And just remember, at the end of the day, you've got this, we've got you, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.